Hi guys, welcome back to Off-Grid K&A. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the channel. For those of you who are returning viewers or subscribers, thanks for tuning in. Today is going to be a little bit of a different video. It is a prepping video, but a little bit on the a little bit of a different approach, if that makes sense. What I wanted to talk about today was education prepping, or prepping in the sense of education. Everybody always talks about prepping or preparing. For those of you who don't know what prepping is, it's the mentality of preparing for a worst case scenario, whatever that worst case scenario might be. Everybody always talks about it though in the sense of physical things, in the sense of collecting or buying or getting physical things. And I feel like there's a part, this part of prepping is very much overlooked in terms of the educational space. People think about getting their groceries, their water, their tools, their gadgets, their ammo, whatever it might be. People think of getting physical stuff. And nobody ever really talks about this idea of knowing what to do with those things. Forget having an axe. Do you know how to use an axe in various different ways to maybe cut down trees or protect yourself or whatever it might be? Forget knowing where the closest hospital is. Do you actually know how to perform first aid yourself if you're in the middle of nowhere? Forget stocking up on tons of water and making sure you have all of this bottled water in plastic jugs, no less, available to you. Do you know where to find a fresh water source that hopefully other people don't really know about, right? It's not something that people, I don't think about too often, is knowing what to do or how to utilize the resources that they have in order to actually prepare should they not have those physical things available. So on that note, there's kind of a recent trend going around that I've seen, and it's called werewolf preppers, if you are a werewolf prepper. So preppers in general being this idea of a person or a human being who has thought of a worst case scenario, or who has kind of looked around at the world and imagined this worst case scenario based on evidence, and they've decided that they are going to prepare for this. That's the general idea of a prepper. A werewolf prepper is someone who has decided that should that worst case scenario happen, they're going to be someone who takes from other people, hence the term werewolf prepper. So there's a couple problems with that, and in the sense of educational prepping, I think this is important to mention. If you want to be a werewolf prepper, you have to realize that preppers, actual real preppers, have thought about your situation beforehand because they've had the time, they've made the time and the resources, and will have some sort of solution in order to deal with you. Now, if you are a werewolf prepper and let's say you get away with something with a prepper and you get away with being a werewolf prepper, that still doesn't solve your problem, and this is what this video is about. It still doesn't solve your problem of not knowing what to do with the things that you have now taken from others. So knowing how to utilize your resources is going to be one of the most important things that you can do for yourself. And regardless of the state of the world or the state of whatever political situation, that's important, is knowing how to utilize your resources. This is an age of information, and it's really unfortunate, I think, how we've sort of been dumbed down as a society. I see this firsthand as someone who is a teacher and who runs my own tutoring and educational consulting business. I see this all the time with children that I teach, with children that my company teaches, and with other people that I come into contact with. Who are adults within the sphere of the educational spectrum. People don't know how to actually utilize resources anymore. And in the case of, let's say, food, it's become glaringly obvious to me that there's an extreme disconnect. I have had multiple occasions where I have talked about something, living this sort of off-grid lifestyle. My kids, the ones that I teach, are very interested in, oh, like, how does that work? Like, oh, it's really cool that you live on a homestead. Like, what happens with your animals? Like, how do you butcher them? I've had questions from my students like, doesn't it make you sad that you have to kill your animals, right? And to which my response is always, well, yeah, a little bit, but I feel better knowing that that animal has had a good life because it's here, I'm in control of it, or Andre is in control of it, and we give our animals a happy life here. They get out, they get to do things, they get to go and be animals. And then at the end of their life cycle, when it's butcher time, we are able to be connected to that meat, right? In the case of chickens or goats or rabbits or whatever. And so it's a much different way of looking at your food. And this student who asked me this question kind of thought, oh, like, okay, like, yeah, she's like, that makes sense. That makes sense. So when you bring it about in that way, it's a little bit different. I also had a student the other day, we were playing a game of 20 questions and my object was cheese. And it devolved into kind of a little bit of an exploration because he didn't know that you could make cheese from goat's milk. He didn't know that you could make cheese from cow's milk. He thought that it came from the store. Like it was just made in the store. It was an artificial product. So in the case of educational prepping, like this is part of what the problem is that we become so disconnected from how we used to live as a society and where our things, whether that's food or clothes or water or whatever it might be, are stuff that we need to live like on a regular basis. And I don't mean wants, I mean needs. Our stuff that we need to live on a regular basis. We become so disconnected from that over the past, I want to say 50 years, to the point where I'm talking to a high school student who thinks that cheese comes from a grocery store. And sadly, he's not the only one. It happens a lot. And my kids now at this point know better because I try to do my best to talk about this sort of thing and incorporate that sort of learning into academic learning that we do as well, and into the life skills that we talk about, and the holistic learning aspect of what my business provides. But it's very sad to see, and I think about all the kids whose parents don't have the interest or don't have the knowledge themselves, or who don't want to give their child that experience or that opportunity to learn about the natural ways of how things are or how things should be and how things used to be. That's a very dangerous pathway to walk, because when you look at the way that the world is going, just in general, isn't it always a better idea to be prepared for your own systems and to put your own systems in place than it is to depend upon a large conglomerate of what has turned out to be a very fragile system? Just some food for thought. So this sort of problem, or this sort of challenge that we face kind of in our society today, where people are so disconnected, that's not really anyone's fault per se. Like, I'm not blaming anyone for that because it's just kind of the way society has happened. I don't blame people for not knowing, and I don't blame people for not being aware of that. What I think needs to happen is that people need to take an interest in that. I don't blame people, and I will never blame people for not knowing, but I will blame people for willful ignorance. Because if you are willfully ignorant of where your food comes from, of what skills you're able to build upon, of what things you are able to do, and you'd rather just sit and, I don't know, play video games or waste away your time at a bar or whatever. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy those things. Of course you can. But if you willingly choose to put those things at a higher importance than you do as being responsible for yourself and making sure that you are educated on your basic survival skills, that's a problem. It's a real problem. And I think that is a large part of why we see what we do today, with a lot of people not knowing where their food comes from, not knowing what the supply chain, like where the supply chain is going, and having a lot of instability and a lot of insecurity around their food and around their water and around their supplies. If you're so uncomfortable with it, then make a change and put your own systems in place. It is not all that difficult to do. You can make your own change anywhere you would like. It just takes some discipline. It definitely takes some creative, outside of the box thinking, but it is possible. And you might ask yourself, like, well, why is she going on about this? Like, why is it so important? Like, what's the big deal? I had somebody tell me recently that, like, that I shouldn't be teaching kids this sort of thing, that life skills and like this sort of real life knowledge and survival skills were not important anymore. That really, I didn't take it personally, but I had someone tell me that. I have had people tell me in the past that it is embarrassing to have to show people what, life used to be like and how we used to live like 100 years ago or what have you. And I've had people say that, like, I have had people say that it is not something that needs to be shown. Like, it's like everybody knows how to do that already. Why would you want to waste your time doing such a thing? And I never take comments personally. I try my very best not to take comments personally, because I try to understand that everybody is coming from their own perspective. But it just goes to show you that not everyone has a growth mindset. Not everyone is willing to accept change. Not everyone is informed on how our world works. We are in an age of information, and if you don't know something, there's no shame in not knowing something. I tell my students this all the time. There's no shame in not knowing something. What is shameful, like I said, is willful ignorance. If you choose not to participate in furthering your own education, that's where it's shameful. That's where it's a problem. You have to remember that just because our world has changed in terms of how we operate, doesn't mean that our basic survival skills have changed, and it doesn't mean that it's any less important. There's a wealth of information out there. There has always been since the age of the internet. There's lots of places that you can find information. We are one such channel where you can find useful pieces of information, a little bit of a rant style as well, and just along the lines of preparing and making sure that you are up to date on everything that you need to be up to date on. But in terms of information, that's something that you can always find. So we're one such channel. If you would like to find out more, if you want to hear more of these videos, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can get more of us. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.